All right, and welcome to the IDP Guys Network. My name is David Kelly. I'm here with Matt Record and Steve Thomason. And today we're going to do a nice little episode talking about the IDP Invitational. Drafts are starting on Monday. This is a lovely little tournament. I was in this last year. I had a great time drafting it. Very similar to Scott Fishbowl. It's the Scott Fishbowl on offense and then 11 IDP starters on defense. So we're going to start with the offensive part first and just talk about the little intricacies of that scoring. So Scott Fishbowl, typical for quarterbacks on yardage, 1 for 25 points, 6-point touchdowns. But where the differences come in is sort of in like the quarterback efficiency. So in Scott Fishbowl and IDP Invitational scoring, you get an extra half point for completions, but you get -1 for incompletions. You get -4 for interceptions. We have kept the Scott Fishbowl 10 setting, so the -2 for a pick six is still there, and the -1 for a sack is still there. So with quarterbacks especially, you can get a lot more variance with them. You can get 40-point weeks pretty easily, but you can also get negative weeks. Aaron Rodgers had a -9 right off at the beginning of the year.
That's right.
Patrick Mahomes had a 0.8 week last year. Other than that, half point for receptions, half point for first downs, and tight ends get a bonus. They get a full point for receptions and a full point for first downs. So I've talked a little bit too much, but what I'll do is I'm going to start with Matt because Matt and Steve both did the Scott Fishbowl this year. I did not, but I will bring up Matt's draft first, and I'll let you, Matt, talk about, how did you feel about this kind of format? How did you feel about your room drafting this? What were you kind of focusing on for Scott Fishbowl that you can kind of carry over to the IDP Invitational?
Yeah, sure. So this was my first year in the Scott Fishbowl, and as you sort of went through the scoring of it, there are definitely some unique scoring settings that I was just I've never had in my home leagues, right? Earnestly, for being fully honest, this is my first super flex league, so completely changed the strategy. Obviously, for those that don't know, Superflex is like a regular flex where typically regular flex, you can start a running back, wide receiver, and tight end in there. The Superflex means you can start a second quarterback. You can throw a quarterback in there. So as we all know, quarterbacks are the most point scoring position out there. So I went into it expecting, again, drafting from the 8th spot, as you can sort of see here. I wanted to get a quarterback sort of done. For those that aren't aware, 12 team leagues here. So Hurts landed to me at 7. I'm not fully sold on Hurts as the answer for quarterback at Philadelphia, but when he was there at 7, this is a big, kind of like the Invitational. It's a big league, so you got to swing for the fences. It's like, you know what? I'm going to go with Hurts. I'm just going to go with him, and then either it's going to work and I'm going to look like a genius, or it's not, and that's fine. In retrospect, I don't love taking Stafford at 205, especially now with the weird elbow stuff that's happening with him.
That's disappointing, right?
It's disappointing, but like I wanted a stable QB2 because those are two people in theory in this format I can just start and play, right? And then at that point, I did a bunch of mock drafts, and like quarterbacks are super important. And then I was like, I know running back is tough. Like running back is in theory short with RB1s that on their teams, not just in fantasy, that are going to get a bunch of snaps. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to go after running backs early, fade wide receivers and tight ends and fill it in. As you can see, that's not what happened. Because all of a sudden at 305, Stephon Diggs was there, and it's like he could lead the league in targets, and Josh Allen's a beast. So it's like, okay. I'm a Patriots fan, so it's like, well, if Diggs is going to destroy me, I might as well get something from it. So he was there, and then 408, as you were mentioning, there's a tight end premium, right? Like tight end catches, like there's value in tight ends, and there's a pretty steep drop off after. I'd say probably after Kittle, if not after 5, 10-5. So it's like, if I take Kittle, I have the advantage of tight end against most of my league, right? And then, as happens in 12-team leagues, things fall off fast, right? So as you'll see, I really like the running backs I ended up with. Like Montgomery is nothing super sexy, but he's gonna play. He's gonna get stats. AJ Dillon, I think with the Packers, I think he's gonna get a lot of playing time too, and I think they're gonna focus the running backs there a lot. And then I'm a Patriots fan, so I took Damian Harris, which again I think people are fading him way too much. But yeah, not to go into each every player. I know I've been talking for a while, so I in retrospect probably shouldn't have taken Stafford. Waited a little bit longer on quarterbacks to get some higher end, probably running back talent. But at the end of the day, I think my plan worked because I got a lot of people I really liked. The stats for projections don't like my team quite a bit. But that's okay. Who
Screw
needs
that.
projections? Who needs them? I have a high integrity team. Good locker room guys here. Sort of high morale. And then as we'll talk about, really after pick 12, probably after the 12th round, you're just taking shots. Like, I know we don't have many bench spots in the invitational, but really everything after that was just maybe one of these is going to hit. Obviously there's two people you see there, Mechie and Ross, who are probably out for the entire year already. And the joke, at least in my group, is you don't want to be a late end pick in my draft because you're going to be out for the year.
I love Dubes though.
I love Dubes too. Things are coming out pretty nicely from Packer camp, but I think to end my little segment here, it's really just know the scoring. Like in this particular format on offense, you need quarterbacks to win. As you mentioned, there are going to be quarterbacks that will have bad weeks. Like even the best of the best will have bad weeks. But on the whole, you're going to need two quarterbacks to win. So get them as quickly as you can. And then sort of the rest of it sort of just fill in from there. And yeah, running backs are difficult to sort of predict, and you can probably wait on some wide receivers. Because, look at my wide receivers there, like Elijah Moore, Cooper, Burks in the 31 to 46. Like, those are serviceable wide receivers, in my opinion. You can wait to get some serviceable wide receivers. Whereas, like, the running backs, you're probably looking at and being like, I don't know. So yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic about my team, but we'll see where it goes.
You know what? There's things I like about your team. Like, a quarterback is going to be a very tough decision for everybody in this because we've seen a lot of them get drafted quite early. Like this year in the Scott Fish Bowl, I think there's about 13 or 14 quarterbacks who get drafted within the first two rounds, which is more than last year. But no, I think this is a good group. I mean, at the end, you've had some injuries, but I think there's like a week 0 waiver wire run in Scott Fish Bowl. So as the camp develop and situations develop, you can drop some of those guys and pick someone else up. But no, I like this. Like Treylon Burks on the 11th is kind of nice. And we'll see, right? Because rookie wide receivers can come on quite a bit towards the end of the year, and that's when you need them in Scott Fish Bowl playoffs. So yeah, we've covered yours, Matt. We'll go over to yours, Steve. You were drafting the 12 spot, which, funnily enough, is where you will be drafting in the Scott Fish or in the IDP Invitational as well. So how about you take us through your team?
Yeah, I mean, I was pretty happy with my draft. I feel like with the quarterback scoring settings, it sort of equalizes the Konami code quarterbacks a little bit, right? I think it favors the more traditional pocket passers because a lot of times those running QBs don't always have the highest completion percentages and, maybe are prone to throw more interceptions, take sacks if they can't get out of the pocket in time to take off running. So with that being said, Lamar Jackson, I still think it was an incredible value at the very end. I saw him go as early as like 1.4, 1.5 to certain people. So I was thrilled that he was, a high. He finished QB 12 in points per game last year. So if that's his floor, I'm perfectly happy with that. And then the hot thing in the streets is stacking, right? So I grabbed his top target in Mark Andrews with my next pick there, knowing that I'm going to have the early third round reversal pick, which we do not have in the Invitational correct? I
Correct.
thought Nate said we did not do third round
Correct.
reversals. So that's going to be the biggest, that's going to be the biggest challenge for me to overcome. So that's why I sort of punted wide receiver, but was pretty happy to get Devontae there. I'm still not expecting Green Bay production, but I'm still expecting him to be a top 5, top 6 type guy.
Well, Derek Carr is another Hall of Fame quarterback.
Yeah, apparently, right? So yeah, I think my first 3 there are, pretty solid at some top end positions. By that time, I think I sort of consciously made the decision that I was going to punt on running back, which you can see by my build here is I very obviously punted on running back. I think I did that learning from last year. Last year I took Jonathan Taylor as my first round pick, and Derek Carr was my number 1 QB, and I was struggling and streaming my second QB all year, and it was a pain, and I just missed out. I think I made the first round of the playoffs, but was immediately knocked out, or maybe it was right on the cusp of not even making it. I can't quite remember. So that's where, Matt, I think you kind of did the same thing. I balanced my Konami code QB with a more traditional passer. You had Hurts and Stafford.
100%.
I took Matt Ryan. I'm really big on Ryan this year, actually. I think he's a perfect target for Scott Fishbowl, and I probably reached on him a little bit. But I think behind that line with that running game and the passing weapons, I think he could have – honestly, I think he could have a career year for him. I think he could have career best in yards and touchdowns potentially. I'm that high on him. So then I went with the stack with his – potential number 1 weapon in Pittman there. Rolled the dice with Watson. We'll see how that shakes out. I try to compartmentalize, not to get too off topic, but compartmentalize the fantasy versus the real world stuff. So
separate
that was
player.
More of a, it doesn't feel great. And if he gets suspended all season, I'll be perfectly happy and fine with that, and I'll just find someone else. But I thought, with what we were hearing about at the time, the 6-game suspension, I thought that was a good enough risk to take there and a pretty good value if it does end up only being 6 games. So we'll see how that shakes out.
QB 23 for that talent on that team.
Exactly. So we'll see. We'll see how it shakes out. So stacked him. So I've got stacks at all 3
stacks
levels.
On stacks. Then he stacked running backs, man.
We'll see how that all shakes out. But yeah, Cooper, he should be the top target there. I love grabbing Ertz where I got him for T premium, as high as some of the top end guys are going. Without Hopkins there, he could get off to a monster start, which I would love, which will help me with my drafting of quite a few of the rookie wide receivers. You can see with the rest of my draft: London, Pickens, Bell, and my little sleeper guy there at the very end, Kyle Phillips.
Kyle Phillips can be a steal.
They're going to be, potentially a slow burn. So hopefully my big 3 and my big 2 tight ends will all carry me through, like you said, David, to that launching point of when rookie wide receivers usually take off in the second half of the year. So that was kind of my plan. And then I just tried to load up on, honestly, high upside running backs or running backs with specific roles. So I doubled up the Seattle backfield. I know a lot of people are down on them, but I think for the value there, back to back, I took Walker and Penny. I'm kind of just hoping to see one of them shake out. I'm probably going to be starting Penny. As long as he stays healthy, he could have that, main running back role locked down. So I'm just kind of hoping to see that one of them shakes out, whether injury or play will decide that one of them gets, the lion's share of the carries. I'm high on Ronald Jones. I think he's going to do well in Kansas City. I have Tyler Algier from Atlanta, rookie running back. A lot of good reports coming out with him. Potentially, letting Patterson be more of that Swiss Army knife and not having to carry the bulk of the load at running back. So I think he's got some upside there. And then I took 2 role players in Boston Scott, Kenyon Drake, pass catchers. They have specific roles on the team. And if injuries occur, they can have, potentially more workload. I grabbed Snoop Connor because I'm not a James Robinson guy. Apparently, he's a lot healthier than we expected, but I still think that's probably smoke and mirrors personally. So I think Connor could, if he carves out a nice training camp, maybe he gets himself a role. If not, he's my 19th round pick, and I'll simply drop him for somebody else, and not a very big deal. Keyshawn Vaughn, same thing. If he can, stay climb up the depth chart over Chad White, then maybe he's got a chance. If not, I move on. And I took one kicker in Jason Sanders. I think he bounces back hopefully this year. So pretty happy overall.
Yeah, I like this. I like this kind of setup where you wait on running back because the Scott Fishbowl is very friendly to these kind of like zero RB type strategies. You've got
that's what I learned from
flex
last
spots
year.
You can stuff receivers in, and you've got a nice little mix of like you should be able to find 2 running backs for week 1 that are going to give you some points while you wait for players to get hurt or rookies overtake vets or whatever. So yeah, I think this is a nice little team. I will segue that into my zero RB spiel. So like we said, there's 3 extra bench spots in here, so you can start 6 wide receivers easily. With the IDP Invitational in particular, whereas a Scott Fishbowl, you have 11 starting spots and 11 bench spots. The IDP Invitational has 30 roster spots, 11 starting spots on offense, 11 for the defense, and 8 on your bench. Most players last year carried 2-3 IDPs on the bench. What did you carry last year, Santa? Is that kind of how you set up on the bench?
I think so. If I did, I probably would shave that back even this year. I'm pretty sure I maybe have 1 or 2 backup, like either linebacker or defensive lineman. Because of the scarcity, I'm usually a load up on offense type guy for especially the bench. So yeah, I'm maybe at certain points of the year I had up to 3, but probably only going to be 1 or 2 for most of the year if I can help it.
Yeah, so and what you'll end up seeing in the invitationals, because the bench spots are less, you'll just have more players on waivers. Like what an invitational draft might look like with your draft is basically everyone from Kenyon Drake on down just doesn't get drafted and is there on waivers.
Right.
I remember Elijah Mitchell last year.
Oh, I was going to say, I feel like most people in the combined offense and defense leagues, all the names people know traditionally are offensive players. So you're going to see people like a David Bell get drafted because they're a hot rookie that's doing stuff in camp. And this is not just for our the Invitational, but every other league. Typically, you can get a lot of really good value for really good defensive players, which we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about later. You can be smarter than everyone else in the room, knowing that they're going to be good defensive players, but without the good offense, you're sort of forced to stack up on offense just to get lucky with some of those picks. So, sorry, I interrupted you.
No, that's all good. I was just my anecdote was going to be that last year in the Invitational, Elijah Mitchell drafted in 0 drafts, and so he was a very, very popular week 1 waiver pickup once we had some clarity on what was going on in San Francisco. I had a little chart. Is it this one? Nope, this one. And this is an article I did on IDP Guys in January after it ended, but this is the average draft position from the Invitational tournament and the points scored from every player. So all the orange dots you see are the wide receivers, all the blue ones you see are the running backs. But generally what you see is that the wide receivers at same ADP scored more than the running backs through to about pick 150 or so. So that's about 13th round. But you see a lot of wide receivers clustered up here. You see a lot of running backs below the line here. There were a lot of injuries at running back last year, like a lot of first round picks last year.
Yes, there always are.
So every year can be a little bit different, but so we'll segue and talk into the part that we're all excited to talk about for the IDP Invitational, and that is the defensive side. So for the IDP Invitational, we start 1 defensive tackle, 2 defensive ends, 3 linebackers, 3 safeties, 1 cornerback, and 1 IDP flex spot. The scoring setting for the IDP Invitational a little bit different. This is a table that is in an article I did. It's kind of buried in the IDP draft kit, but this is just a comparison of a bunch of different scoring settings that we see either pushed by different sites or adopted as standards elsewhere. So the IDP Invitational is the one that you see third here. It's a 2-point per solo tackle system. The asterisk here is because cornerbacks have a premium in the IDP Invitational, so cornerbacks get an extra half point for a solo tackle. They get an extra
cornerbacks relevant.
Yeah, we make cornerbacks relevant, and they get an extra half point for pass defended. But what I wanted to highlight in the scoring is only 4 points for a sack for the Invitational. A lot of the other scoring settings that you see that use 2 for a solo score a sack a little bit higher. The sack points are very much in line with like the Fantasy Pros, ESPN standard scoring, the scoring setting that the Fantasy and Frames guys brought out this year. And the impact of that is that defensive ends just score a little bit less than linebackers do. It ends up being a little bit more linebacker heavy. So last year we had TJ Watt. He tied the sack record. He had a fantastic season. 2 or 3 linebackers had better scoring seasons than he did. Nick Bosa was the second highest scoring defensive end in the league last year in this scoring. About Smith. 23 linebackers beat him. Sorry?
Was Roquan Smith number 1?
Foyer. I thought the same thing. It was Foyer.
Oh, it's Foyer.
I know. You forget because he's not actually that good.
Of course. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, Foye Lucan had like almost 190 tackles or something last year.
Oh, it was absurd
in Atlanta.
Yeah. Okay.
So what I wrote in the article for IDP Guys this week is that we shouldn't forget about linebackers in this setting. A lot of times you'll hear people talk about So I guess I'll ask you guys, where are you guys at on how you're planning on approaching IDPs in this draft? I know Matt, both you and Steve are in the same draft, so you can keep some things from each other if you want. But I'm curious what your thoughts are on this.
I'll keep it pretty vague. I'm not going to give you any hints. But let's just say I'm drafting every single New England Patriot defender. So we're going to be on defense a lot.
Good luck figuring out linebacker there.
Fact. So I guess again, this is my first invitational. The scoring is a little different, which I like, and earnestly I really prefer the big splash plays being de-incentivized. If that's the right word. Like the fact that sacks are worth fewer, because everything where if you're in the IDP world, I know a lot of people who have big say in the industry or big 3 scoring, and just sacks are a touch. That's 6 points. It's a touchdown, right? Whereas because I think their argument is you can get tackles and not be very good. Right. Looking at you for you, but I like it. Like getting tackles means you were in the right place in the right time, like for whatever reason, right? So the way I am planning on approaching it is looking at linebackers. It seems like linebackers are sort of going the way of running backs in the sense that linebackers that are on the field for all 3 downs are becoming more rare. Right. So there's a lot of running back by committees, and typically you think of your standard linebacker and it's like, yep, there, of course, you're starting linebackers out there for 3 downs. That's just not the case anymore for certain defenses. Like I'm looking at the Chiefs, especially, sort of notably known for doing like a linebacker by committee, which is extremely frustrating. Well, when you're owners of those people. But yeah, I'll be looking for players that are on the field for 3 downs, especially hyping up the tackles, and then looking for, at least personally, I look for more stable defensive ends or edges. I forget exactly how we quantify it in the invitational. Is it edge?
The defensive end.
DE. Yeah, I look for people that have a healthy floor in tackles, because as we mentioned, two points per tackle, you can get a healthy floor, and a lot of other scoring systems for defensive ends, you can get a goose egg pretty quick if someone just doesn't hit pay dirt and get a sack. I know there's quite a few DEs out there that Might only have a ceiling of 9-10 sacks a year, but will end up with 60-70 combined tackles, which in this particular format I'm here for. So I think any risk I'm going to take is probably in the defensive back court category. That's my plan. Again, it's my first year, so that might be completely wrong. Santa, tell me I'm crazy.
Doing the Ryan Howard gif. Noted.
Yeah. Or is that my plan? Or is that my plan?
I'm close to being in the same boat. I'm definitely. I think I'm probably punting D line, to be perfectly honest. I'm never going to be, especially for IDPs. I just know how much like depth in general there is. So I'm rarely going to be the person, especially like taking like the first rounds of IDPs, like pulling the trigger to start runs and stuff like that. I might not want to miss out on a run, but I'm rarely going to be the person to start it. So yeah, I'm probably punting D line, definitely punting cornerback. I think I'm going to try to get top end safeties, top end linebackers. Like you said, maybe not the Derwins or the Roquans of the world, but those like next tier guys, Devondre Campbell's of the world, Jeremy Chin's of the world. So I think that's probably going to be my strategy if it works out. If there's not, there's just always like so many more enticing offensive players usually at those ADPs than it almost feels like wasting a pick on an IDP who I know I might be able to grab. Like I'm just fairly confident in my knowledge of like the depth of like you were getting like guys like Logan Wilson last year, like super cheap. Like I love trying to dig and find like the next Logan Wilson. He might even still be a decent value this year. I feel like people are still kind of forgetting about a guy like that. But so yeah, targeting someone like him or who I think might be the next Logan Wilson, an up and coming type guy. So I'm just fairly confident in myself and my knowledge of that. If you're a newer person, I get it. You might, from both a having fun perspective and just not maybe knowing deeper names, pulling the trigger on the top end guys. I think that's totally fine. And I think you can certainly win doing that as well. There's just usually more exciting offensive players I want at those higher ADP rounds. So, yeah, and cornerback, the premiums, like it's nice that they're there, but they're not really going to change it to make some cornerbacks like really that much more valuable than other positions even, I don't think. For the half-point tackle and a half-point press breakup, they're already lower volume stats overall for cornerbacks. So throwing a half point extra at them, I'm not sure is going to accomplish a whole lot rather than just like a nice little cherry on top if your guy has a good week that week. So yeah, I'm definitely punting them still too.
Yeah, and you're looking for separation, right? Like difference between your players and your opposing team's players, and it's sort of what you just mentioned. On defense, there's a lot, there's a lot of depth in a lot of places, and I even just I was just finished up recording, our top 30 edge guys, like talking about 30 edge guys, and like the difference between 12 and 30 isn't really as much as you'd expect it to be,
Right.
versus so much attention is put on offense, and the difference between 12 and 30 there is like that's pretty drastic, which is why as you were sort of just mentioning, like the strategy, like load up on offensive guys, like you're going to be able to differentiate yourself there, and then realistically, because we have so few bench spots, right, you're going to find someone that can fill in on a bye week just fine on the waiver wire.
On the waivers, yeah.
So yeah, that's granted. I'm definitely one in all the mock drafts I've been doing. I'm definitely one to start a run. So there's something for you. Just at a certain point when it comes down to wide receiver 3 versus like the first defensive player, it's like there's something to be said. Like maybe not Roquan Smith based off of the the contract disputes and whatnot. But like, it's just nice having someone like, maybe not Micah Parsons in our scoring format, but like, it's just nice just having him, right? It's just, or TJ Watt, like, it's nice having him.
Yeah.
Granted, Santa, no means to put you under the bus, nor me, because I didn't have any chances. We didn't win last year.
Yeah.
So what should we be doing? What's the strategy? Has it worked?
Champ.
Yeah, well, I was hoping not to get outed as the reigning champion in this, but no,
Come on.
you guys brought up a bunch of good points though. I will get to that, but I'll start with a couple of things that you guys said. So first of all, Matt, it is true position in this tournament. So especially at linebacker, you do lose a lot of depth than you see in leagues that aren't true position, because in non-true position leagues, you can sometimes kind of fill in with those handful of guys who are really pass rushers who get classified as linebackers. Well, those guys are all gone. So when you're sort of scouring waivers to find guys, you're really more looking for guys who are injury fill-ins, guys who are overcoming veterans as starters and things like that. You also had a good point about the scoring and kind of like how the big plays have been de-emphasized. You brought up scoring last year. In the Fantasy Pros standard, he finishes LB7. So I would, as I'm kind of imagining how drafts are going to develop, like I feel like he is more likely going to be drafted as like the 4th, 5th, 6th linebacker. That's kind of how I've seen him on.
Yeah, I missed you.
You cut out for a second. What was the name? Oh, Parsons.
Oh.
Okay.
Oh yeah, I was saying Parsons was LB12 in the Invitational last year, but he was LB7 in Fantasy Pro scoring. So that sort of archetype of player who's getting a lot of sacks at linebacker just doesn't do as well as his peers. So and I don't know what you guys have seen if you've done other IDP drafts this year, but I found he gets drafted 4th, 5th at the position at linebacker, maybe even earlier.
Oh, I've seen
him
in
the Invitational.
Like LB2.
Yeah.
I think that's risky in this format. Like I think there's other ones where that is
100%.
That's a very good pick. I forget who brought up the big 3 scoring, but I know Steve, you and I have both done some of these best balls that those guys have put together. That scoring wildly different than what we're going to see in the Invitational here. They score a point and a quarter for a solo tackle. They score 6 points for a sack. So when you're doing a draft in that format, and especially with those leagues, they've done a lot of best balls. You need to make sure that you are solid at defensive line, because you just need to get those weeks where you're getting sacks from players, because they're either going to get a sack or they're just not scoring any points. Yeah.
And the best ball format aids in that too, where you just want to load up, because whoever gets the sack that week is automatically populating in your lineup. Whereas the Invitational, you still have to manually set and pick your lineup.
And for an exact example, like look at the Bengals defensive line, right? Like we were just talking about this in the other stream, which you should check out on IDP Guys YouTube. Like, subscribe. Sam Hubbard and Trey Hendrickson, right, on the Bengals, where, and of course it's late, so I'm switching the two up. I believe Trey Hendrickson gets all the sacks, right? And Sam Hubbard gets the stable floor of tackles. So depending on your format, right, one is maybe more advantageous than the other. In this format, especially based off of where the ADP is going to be, I'd almost rather have Sam Hubbard, someone that you know is going to get tackles and give you points, right? Versus that's
a great example. Yeah.
Again, like the splash play, like probably Trey Hendrickson scores more points at the end of the day, but in terms of having a stable floor of points to be doing stuff, like I'd almost prefer Sam Hubbard, which might be right, might be wrong.
Well, you're right. Sam Hubbard did outscore Hendrickson in the Invitational last year. So yeah, guys like that who have historically gotten a lot of tackles are a little bit more interesting here. Danielle Hunter, another one. I mean, Danielle Hunter has been a fantastic player, has also gotten a lot of sacks, but he's also been
when healthy.
When healthy, but he's been a very good run defender as well. You guys talked about cornerback and the bonus not being so great for them. I agree with that too. The big quarterbacks get 4 points for defend to pass. So that is something that makes cornerbacks very valuable. They're here, the extra half point for the pass defended, making it the same value as the tackle for them. I don't think it really moves the needle for them. I did see people in drafts last year taking like Kenny Moore in like the mid-teens or so.
Yeah.
I don't know if you need to do that. You can wait all the way to the end in the stream if you really want to. We just start one here, right? So there's going to be a lot of guys on waivers. But you asked what I did. So for 2020, I didn't do the Invitational the first year it was, but I decided to go look at the ADP and chart it. And this is the chart that I had that year. So the blue dots and the blue line are kind of all the linebackers that year. So average draft position on the bottom, the points they scored on the top. And linebackers just scored really, really well. Defensive line had a lot of injuries amongst top drafted guys that year. So sort of at equal ADP, linebacker was the player that you wanted. Safety did fairly well too, but again, a very flat line. So you were getting guys later in drafts that were scoring similarly to guys at the top of the draft. The linebacker that year very much went by ADP, where the top guys scored very, very well, and there weren't as many of them later on. Last year, it looked a little bit more evened out. There was a bit of a shift in ADP last year where in 2020, the first 10 defensive players taken is about 50-50 defensive linemen, linebackers. Last year, you can kind of see the first defensive end here, that's TJ Watt. The first safety here, that was Derwin James, Buda Baker. There was a bit of a mix. There was a bunch of safeties pretty close to each other.
Yeah.
But at equal ADP, outscored defensive end by 20, 30 points or so. So I don't know. Linebacker is important. When I was in my draft last year, this is going to be kind of a boring answer, but I just kind of counted and was trying to kind of keep pace. So like if we were kind of within the first 12 IDPs draft that I wanted to be in there, I kind of wanted to keep up and not be too far ahead or behind. But you did see a lot of people do various things. Nate was in my draft last year. He went Darius Leonard and Devin White like at the 4-5 or 5-6 turn, something like that. You saw a lot of other people go very, very late. Johnny the Greek talks about waiting forever, like taking Aaron Donald and waiting forever. So a lot of the strategies worked.
Well, I have a question for you then, since this is my first time, and maybe this is a question that other people will have for their first time. Like you're starting 11 offense, right? And 11 defense, right? So classic, we have 11 starters on each side of the ball. That's clever how that worked. So the average defensive player, how do they score in comparison to your average, offensive player? Like not the studs, right? I'm assuming the studs on each position perform like studs, right? But like if you were to, like especially at the end of the draft, like can you win on defense in this league? Like if you were to say heck offense, I'm just gonna go defense, can you do that? Or is that just not a worthwhile strategy?
That's a good question. Like I think it certainly helps. And I think getting a lot of points from linebacker helps. So this is, you guys made me save this to bring this up. This is the winning lineup for last year.
You're dang
so I did have a lot of nice weeks from IDPs that year. Fred Warner had one of his bigger weeks of the season. He had 26 points. This, if everybody remembers, this is the week that Cincinnati had that huge game.
Yeah, they went off.
Yeah, I think Jamar Chase had 3 touchdowns or something like that. So I had Burrow and not Chase. The guy who finished second in this league had Chase. Alex Highsmith had a big score. So this would be my only thing with defensive ends is once you get to those playoff weeks, you do kind of want those spike weeks. And even though the scoring's a little bit depressed on the defensive linemen, you can still get pretty nice weeks out of them. If you guys remember this one, this was that Monday night game with Cleveland where I think TJ Watt had 4 sacks in that game. Highsmith had 2. Like it was Baker Mayfield had a rough night that night. So
Yeah.
I think you need a bit of both. During the season, certainly, the IDP can help you out quite a bit. I still think during the season you probably want to be starting a linebacker in this flex spot.
Yeah.
Just because I don't think you're just going to count on like having a third defensive end in that flex and having him just kind of spike every week for you.
Yeah, just get
when you get in, when you get to the very end, you're trying to finish first out of 10. Then you're trying to hit like a top week. So
sure.
370. This is what it won it last year. Brad, who was the winner of the year before, scored 390 in his final week. I think he had that Kamara game on Christmas or Christmas Eve. Only like 6 touchdowns.
Yeah.
And then they let Taysom Hill run one in instead of him going for the record.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
On Taysom Hill.
It's an interesting question, especially for, I know many of us, not necessarily me, but this is the first, combined league, right? It's both offense and defense. Like, this is your first IDP league. Welcome. It's a whole lot of fun. But it's hard to know who to prioritize and when, right? Because at a certain point, you see a name like TJ Watt there, you're like, ooh,
right.
Like that's
enticing.
That's fun, especially at the route they're going to go, right? Because at that point, you're going to be talking about like wide receiver 20, whatever, and running back 20, whatever. And it's like, oh, should I go with that running back or should I go with maybe the best IDP player that's available, And I think looking at this particular score sheet is a perfect example where you can win with defense. Like your highest scoring player outside of a quarterback, which we've already talked about. Quarterbacks are super important. You need to get quarterbacks right, which is kind of a guesstimation, right? But like you gotta get quarterbacks right.
Right.
It was Alex Highsmith, right?
Yeah.
And then Fred Warner.
What you can also take away from this though is you don't see any of those big names though. And I was going to say, basically, to answer your question, is that I would still recommend leaning offense. If you can hit, I mean, Elijah Mitchell, it was huge, down the stretch there like that, like players like that. And also, it's sort of the moniker of, you can't win the league through the draft, but you can lose it. So balance is key. Look at how balanced this team is.
Right.
There's no like magical like take all defense or take all offense formula. Like you want to just try to stay balanced. I think what David said about like just wanting to keep pace is a really good strategy to recommend. I probably shoot myself in the foot more often than not in punting more longer than I should. But if you maintain a balance and then obviously staying active on waivers, Jonas Griffith was a waiver pickup, I'm assuming, down the stretch there. So, staying up to date with who's playing and who's getting snaps, who's going to be wearing the green dot, all that kind of stuff is super important too. There's no magical win this whole thing at the draft. You know what I mean? It just doesn't happen that way.
Entirely.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you're right. Like you don't have to nail this at the draft because there was a lot of players that I had that didn't make it through the end of the year or just didn't play very well. This year I had the 112. I took Barkley in the first round. He had a couple good weeks early, got hurt.
Yeah.
I had him in the lineup at the end, but it's not like these 12 points is a real game changer. The IDPs look kind of light, and the reason for that is because I had drafted Fred Warner, and then the next two were Danielle Hunter, who got hurt, and Jamal Adams, who got hurt.
Right.
So then they were gone. But otherwise, like cornerback, I streamed all year. Got a nice week at the end from Byron Murphy. Defensive tackle, didn't draft an elite guy, never had an elite guy. Wormley was in here for a while. David Onyemata was in here for a while. Tony Jefferson, I think, was a waiver wire pickup that week. Didn't really help me, but you're right. Like you can certainly like nurse these things along in the season, and then really once you get to the end, you're just hoping to get lucky. So So
I will hammer though. There are some relatively consistent linebackers, especially I know we're hammering linebackers at the 2 points of tackle. Like Cole Holcomb last year, stud,
He's
right?
such a value. Yeah.
He's such a value, and Fred Warner the same way. Like if you're talking like just apples to apples points, I know there's a lot more depth at defense, just for
Yeah.
all the reasons we've already said. But like you will be able to find someone that will be able to put up 18 points
Mhm.
in the defensive side at linebacker way more consistently than you will on the offensive side.
Mhm.
Like, and I just know I just know there are linebackers like, yeah, you of course you end up with 10 combined tackles, right? And you're gonna get those 18 points versus you're hoping that in this particular case, AJ Brown had an off week, right? Like those stud linebackers don't have those off weeks as frequently.
Yeah.
So it's all a balance, right? It's
Balance.
I just
Yeah.
I totally I'm talking myself into this, and maybe it's because we're on IDP guys. Like and subscribe. That like I just feel like there's a path where you can because it's all a gamble at the end of the day. I feel like there's a gamble that I'm probably talking myself into taking, where it's like I'm gonna take 3 or 4 dudes that I expect to get 15 points a week, and then figure it out from there. Maybe that's take
like
with
it.
that Santa as you will.
I like it. I like it.
yeah. The only other propaganda that I will throw in here with this draft is this was a hero RB build. So this was Saquon Barkley, running back that got drafted off this team, was 18th round AJ Dillon. So
Nice.
you can do it, and I had a lot of fun doing it. Doesn't always work. Evan Ronda was in one of the other divisions. He took Christian McCaffrey in the first round. He waited till the 20th round to take his second running back, and he didn't make the playoffs. So,
Yeah.
it doesn't always work out. Obviously, the McCaffrey
Right.
pick didn't work out for those drafters last year, but
Like any other league, you can't win your league in the first round, but you can lose it, and especially with injuries, like you can't predict those things. Like
Mhm.
yeah,
whenever you're drafting, assume you're right. Assume you're right, because when he drafted McCaffrey, he assumed that he was going to be a stud, right? Assume you're right. Otherwise, you're not going to have a chance anyway.
Yeah, and if you are right on something like if McCaffrey plays the whole year, and I think this is even true this year, that if he plays the whole year, he easily the favorite to score the most points at this position.
Oh yeah.
So we covered that. I had a few other things. We talked about bench spots and the bench scarcity there. So you will have to make choices in this league in terms of like what you're carrying. I personally think you probably want to carry a couple extra running backs and receivers on your bench every week. So whether that's at the expense of, like, you're almost certainly not carrying a second cornerback. I did see some people draft 2 of them last year. Like, don't bother carrying a second defensive tackle, especially if you've got an elite guy like a Donald or a Buckner. Like, that's your guy. You're not putting anybody else in unless it's a bye week.
Right. Where do y'all feel? Yeah, where do y'all feel, or what do y'all feel about the third quarterback spot? Because I know super flex, right? Like in order for you to win, you probably need 2 quarterbacks that are starting. Where do you land on the third quarterback spot, especially in a 12 team division, right? That means 36 quarterbacks. If everyone took 3, that's not. You got 4 people that aren't starting there.
Right.
Like, do you prioritize that or not?
It's tough. There's no trading, so I want to try to be one of the people that at least has a starter, quote unquote, as a third quarterback. But I'm not gonna like stress over it too much, I don't think. So I'm gonna try, but yeah. It would be nice. It's kind of like a luxury thing, right? It would be nice to have it, but life will go on if I don't, and I'm probably not gonna sweat it too much if I end up with Drew Lock. Like, I'll probably, if it comes down to drafting Drew Lock, then I'm probably gonna just roll with 2 and pray for the best.
Last year I put the blinders on, took my 2, and didn't even think about a third, because the bad quarterbacks just get killed in the scoring, and I'm sure there were startable weeks out of guys off of waivers. Like I'm sure Davis Mills gave you startable weeks at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Tyler Huntley, when he took over for Lamar Jackson, almost certainly gave you startable weeks. So I probably should have a little bit more of an open mind on that this year. I don't think I'm drafting 3, but at least like keeping kind of an eye out in case something happens during the year, or if one of your guys just like doesn't work out.
Well, because there's something because I've seen in some of these drafts, especially in Scott Fishbowl, where people reach for their QB3 in the sense of like I'm not going to get a scrub, like I'm going to take a dude right there at the top. So well, hell, even the Lamar Jackson's a great example, right? Like you got him as QB9, which is a heck of a freaking grab, but like someone like that, and then they take I don't know QB17 and QB22. It's like I'm just gonna get my 3 quarterbacks, and they're all serviceable. You know what I mean? Like they're all up there, so I know I have 3 starting quarterbacks. Because with all the rules in place, like quarterbacks don't really get injured anymore. It's like you expect them to be playing. It's just I don't know, and this is more just me thinking out loud. I don't know where in order for you to win this whole thing, which is what everyone's goal is, right? Like you should try to be winning this entire thing. You need to be right. Like your first 2 need to be right, and you have to assume they're right. Like you can't have a contingency plan of a third quarterback, right?
Yeah.
Especially with this few bench spots. Like Scott Fishbowl, you have so many bench spots. Like you should probably try to get a third one so they can fill in on your bye week or whatever. So I don't know. I am talking this through without a plan for what I'm going to do with that third QB spot. I think I'm talking myself into take the 2 and figure it out. But I know we're going to be put in that situation where it's like, oh, I don't even know who'd be going as QB 23, 24 right now. Maybe
that's what I was going to say. Like,
is it like Mariota?
Or that's probably even early for him, but like Davis Mills or Zach Wilson, like if that ends up being your second QB, like if you take 2 studs early, I would say don't bother. But if you hang on and push your second one, that's when you're talking about the contingency plan. Like if they stink, lose their job, you might want to grab a Mariota and a Davis Mills if those are your 2 and 3, or Trubisky and a Davis Mills as your 2 and 3. So it depends on like the tier of your number 2 QB. I think that's going to dictate that strategy. So and it's all just going to come down to how the drafts flow. You know what I mean? And who's there.
Well, in my Scott Fishbowl, I ended up with Hurts and Stafford, who were kind of like what you were saying, the yin yang, the one guy that like has the big upside, right? And then you have like in theory stable player minus weird elbow injury, but didn't know that at the time. Which I think in this particular format, it's like honestly, that's probably fine. Like I don't need to go get the Zach Wilson of the world, which I did get. Who I do think we are kind of sleeping on this year. I think he has a chance. If not this year, then never. As a Patriots fan, that's fine. But in this particular form, with this few bench spots, it's like I don't know if I need the third quarterback with those 2 stable people, because if one of them doesn't pan out, my team's torched. It's already torched. There's no coming back from that, especially those being 1 and 2 picks. So sorry for the digression.
That's okay.
It's good information.
While you're doing that, let me pull up the quarterback ADP from the Scott Fishbowl, which
as we planned.
As we planned. I mean, but very similar rules. So I think the ADP is applicable. QB 23 Zach Wilson at 102, so that's like in the 9th round. 24 Jared Goff, 25 Deshaun Watson, 26 Daniel Jones, Wentz, Mills, Mayfield, and then. So Mayfield at QB 29. After that, you start to get pretty dusty. Mariota, Trubisky, Pickett, Jimmy G. We'll see where he ends up this year.
Someone takes Brett Favre for old time's sake.
Definitely tough. Definitely guys there with like some upside. Like you can imagine a season where Zach Wilson and the Jets are fantastic. Same with Daniel Jones. Now that Brian Dable's there. Maybe Wentz has a resurgence in Washington, but you could also see scenarios where those guys are horrible and they're running QB sneak on 3rd and 9 and run 6 again. Like
that would never happen. What are you talking about? That's made up.
Brutal.
On purpose.
Yeah, I think that pretty much covers that for bench spots, like especially here where it's a little bit shorter, tough to hold the third quarterback. I haven't looked at bye weeks. I know last year there was like a killer bye week where like the Bills and a bunch of other really good teams were all off on the same week. I don't know if they gave
it's not as bad. It's not as bad this year. There are still a couple weeks where there's some problems, but
hefty hitters.
Yeah. The NFL's got to relax and stop giving us these 16 bye week things. Like just even it out and make it all 4, and like we can manage that. So, so yeah, I think that's we're at 55 minutes. So I think I'm gonna skip the week 17 matchup things. You can go read that in the article. That's probably the most.
I'm sorry. Where's that article? Where's that article?
It's on IDPguys.org.
Oh, that's interesting. IDP Guys.
I think it's published on Wednesday, so it should still be on the front page. But I'll go really quickly because we talked about this pre-show. You guys hated this idea, but week 17, the finals week, you're trying to finish first out of 10. Rams and Chargers play each other. They're both top 10 in neutral pace last year, so you could see a game where there's just a bunch of snaps and teams that have horrible O-lines. Seattle, Vegas, Chicago, they get the Jets, 49ers, and Lions respectively. So does that give you a tiebreaker on Nick Bosa over somebody else? I don't know. It's an awful long way out, and injuries happen on offensive lines. All that stuff kind of changes. So I got told pre-show that this was a bad idea. Do you have any other thoughts on that, Steve?
Like if that – oh, sorry, you said Steve.
Yeah, to me it's just like we're talking about teams and the star players of those teams, like they're good. You're still drafting good players and they play in week 17. So I just personally have a hard time wrapping my mind around that and devoting energy to plan that out. And now you're maybe reaching for guys instead of letting the draft fall to you, planning on a week 17 potential matchup that you have no clue what the starters might even look like by then. If Herbert loses Williams and Allen, then I don't really care who he's playing week 17. Like, probably not going to have all that great of a game. So yeah, it's just tough for me to wrap my head around devoting brain cells to that.
Yeah, no, you're right. Like, I think if you get Stafford injured and you've got John Wolford in there, I think you see, or I don't even know if Wolford's the backup, but like, I imagine that's a wildly different offense than what they're going to run with Stafford. So, more of a best ball thing, right? Or these big best ball tournaments where you've got hundreds of people in the final week and you don't have access to waivers. So, and they're looking for like these 0.1% edges. So,
right.
But the thought that I thought it was interesting to write up. He's
it's a fascinating.
So that's pretty much it. I guess we should.
Yeah, it's a fun topic.
It's a fun thought experiment, and if you're going through that, then I hope you're drafting against.
Matt, what do you got coming out?
Huh? What do I have coming out? So my main focus for the IDP guys, holy crap, you've made it this far and you haven't liked and subscribed to this channel and video, do it, man. So making a lot of great content for our TikTok channel, so check that out as well. Some very unique things there that you're not going to get on some of our other socials. I will be a part of the IDP sort of rundown every week. So if you're looking for a quick way to see what happened in the previous week and sort of trends that are happening there and which players are doing what we expect them to and which ones had a great week, then maybe you can't expect that the next week. Be looking for that every Monday coming out. And then otherwise I'm your wacky content guy. So if there's some any random things, make sure you check out, I don't know what website, idpguys.org for everything coming out there.
What's your Twitter so we can find you?
Oh, my Twitter is mrecord21. That's at mrecord21.
Perfect. And Steve, what do you got going on this year?
And one hell of a mustache that you're
Damn
pulling
right.
off right there. So I'm just helping to manage all the content over at idpguys.org. We're just trying to grow and put out awesome content to help people win their league. So I'll be chipping in with rankings, probably doing an article every now and then. And just trying to keep the ship steered straight through the season. So I live on Twitter at Dynasty Santa. Love to chop it up there, pretend fake argue with you, and then have a high five, a virtual high five after some hot discussions. So DMs are always open if anybody's got questions or anything. And check us out, please. If you do like and subscribe, share it with people who you might find will like and benefit from the content that we're putting out. We're trying to really grow the IDP platform, as much as possible, because it's just so much fun.
IDP rocks. Y'all should get all your friends into it.
Mm-hmm.
And you can find me on Twitter at DJ Keltown, DJ KELLTOWN. I don't think I'm doing a whole lot for the season. I did a bunch of articles during the off season on rookies for Dynasty. We got a lot of smart people on site. Matt, a few other people. They got you covered. IDPguys.org. If you like this video, we got a lot of other great stuff on the site. Matt did his defensive lineman tiers tonight. That should be up on site already. Mm-hmm. 2 or 3 other guys got their own podcasts. Steve's got Fantasy Ladder. Sicoli's got College Combine. Johnny the Greek's Free Real Estate. I think did you just record that? Steve?
Yeah, that's where I just came from earlier.
I think Brandon Hay has
Brandon Hayes
Debbie stuff going on. There's so much great.
We covered all.
Are your TikToks on the channel too?
It's on the IDP Guys TikTok, which is just at IDP Guys.
And it goes to YouTube.
Over to YouTube. They do.
Yeah. Depending, not all of it. I would say some of the finest work is only on TikTok.
Yeah,
which maybe you should go look at and check it out.
So you're saying you got exclusive content on the IDP.
I'm just saying if you go to the TikTok, you might see something you're not going to see anywhere else.
What's the address for that?
It's just at IDP Guys on TikTok.
Okay. Perfect. So, gentlemen, thank you very much. I really wanted to do this, so I had a great time. Thank you for coming on with me, and we will see you all later.
Sounds good.